Anna, welcome to the Dark Night of the Soul Unwrapped.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. What was happening for you around the time that your Dark Night of the Soul initially began?
For me, it began in 2012. And at that time, they thought I might have cancer, but with really low chances. But they still wanted to do a surgery because I have this gene. So there would be a chance. And this triggered my childhood trauma because my mom had cancer. And yeah, so it all came to the surface, and I was worrying a lot. And then at some point it was evening, and I sat on the couch with a friend, um, and she was studying medicine. And I told her, like, if you would be in my situation, how would you feel or how would you think? Because I'm so worried and I can't stop thinking about it. And then she said, "Oh, I would think I would be fine because the chances are so low of it being ovary cancer." And then I was looking at her and I was like, "Ah, is that possible?" And I said to myself, I also want to be like her. I also want that, like, to look more relaxed at the situation. And that night it started to it became the dark night, so I just got panic attacks and everything started to come out as if it was like a collapse. Like the whole system was holding together until the time, I think in survival mode, and then it crashed. So, yeah, it was really disturbing, and I think the most difficult thing I've experienced.
Just to say, I mean, my crash came about in a different way to yours, but I called mine a crash. And I think there's something about the way that it happens so suddenly. You can say it happened that night in that way, that there's something about the collapse of that structure, that survival structure, which can just happen suddenly or overnight.
Yes, yes.
What then happened as all of that collapse happened? What happened next?
Yeah, it felt like, I was going crazy a bit, like, I had a lot of anxiety. It was mainly anxiety and, like, terror coming to the surface. And my aunt came, that was really sweet because she also had a crisis once in her life, so she understood on some level, and she supported me. She slept with me one night, and she said, like, "Oh, if you see your thoughts, you can just label them. They're not real." So she gave me some understanding already. And then I went to therapy, and it didn't really work because they don't really understand, and it was only on the mental level. Um, yeah, and it was just a lot of suffering in the beginning, basically, and I had no clue what was happening because I had no background in spirituality or anything. So I just thought, I'm not well, I'm in a crisis, and I didn't understand it. And I felt, because in, like, if I'm looking back at it, it feels like on some level I decided it because I said I want this too. And like a few years prior to it, I had written something that also already foresaw, like, I have to go through some big crisis and it's going to be really, really hard. But I also even wrote down, I hope I will do it. Yeah.
So interesting, isn't it, that there's something in us even beforehand that wants it or decides it, or there's some knowing of it. I find that really fascinating.
Me too. Yeah. Did you also have that?
Yeah, what I remember is having the sense that something slightly behind me was pulling me down and back. Like I could almost sense it, and I didn't know what it was, and I was kind of impatient with it because outwardly I thought that I'd finally become successful. And so the idea of stopping and pausing and going down and back when my whole energy was about moving sort of up and forward and achievement and all of that. I mean, what do you make of that now? That whatever it was in you that wanted that had written that.
Yeah, I think it's like the deeper part of me, and I don't really have words for it. I would call it maybe my soul, and that maybe it was. I think it was a big turning point for me to because I lived very disconnected, and I wasn't aware of that. I just thought it was just normal life. But I always felt like something is off, and when I got older, I was never really happy because I felt like, yeah, when I was a child, it was different and something is off here, but it was not so conscious. So I think it was a way to come back to myself, but very dramatic, like very dramatic. And I don't know why it had to be so dramatic. I don't know. But yeah, it was necessary. I think it was necessary to break it all. And maybe also, yeah, I think that it's like intergenerational, that maybe for many generations, people live really disconnected with a lot of trauma before me, and now through me, it's opening up. So it's drastic. I think, but I'm not sure. It also, yeah, it's also a bit mysterious.
I use the word mysterious so often for this because I think there is something mysterious in it. And I completely agree that there is this intergenerational part of it. So it's not only our own personal childhood trauma or our trauma up until that point, but whatever we're carrying, or I'm not quite sure of the right word for that, whatever we're carrying from previous generations. And for me too, it was drastic. I want to come back to the terror and the anxiety for a moment, because that was also really big for me, in particularly at the beginning of the Dark Night. And I think if people haven't experienced it, it's hard to convey just how visceral and physical that is, isn't it? It's like you say, normal talk therapy didn't work because it just wasn't meeting it.
Yeah, it was just really intense, and it felt very real. So I think it was real on some level, like energetically. Like maybe parts of me, parts of the generations before, maybe even past lives that carried like really heavy stuff, and it all of a sudden it came to the surface, and I didn't have any tools or understanding to be with it, so it took me over, and it was so much suffering, and for me it was attached to not being able to sleep. So it said like, oh, you cannot sleep, and you will never get out of this, and yeah, like you will end up in endless suffering. That was the core message of it, and it was very challenging because yeah, you cannot really do much about it. It just takes your system over. So it was really intense. Yeah.
At what point did you start to discover that there might be something else going on here? That this wasn't just you going crazy or.
Yeah, it took like 6 months or so, and a friend of mine, she gave me the book. She was more spiritual, and I came from a background that was very like more atheistic and scientific, and so she gave me a book of Eckhart Tolle, and this was the beginning. Like I remember I received the book, and I felt like, oh, this is not a normal book. It has a message for me, and yeah, I started to understand, and that really made a difference. Like, oh, this is the pain body. It's an awakening. There's more to it. It's not me going crazy or losing it. It's there's intelligence to the process. So that was really beautiful. Yeah, I remember I was at the pool and I was reading it, and I was like, oh, oh, finally. Yeah.
That intelligence feels so important, doesn't it? I mean, it's something that comes up a lot in these conversations, but I think when we're in the middle of the terror, it's really difficult to feel or sense that there is intelligence in it,
Yeah.
because it's so intense, and as you said, it overtakes us so completely. And yet as you said, on some level, something had to be broken. And it feels to me like the terror and the anxiety naturally come as the other things that we've been disconnected from come. I mean, it's almost like that's the first layer, or a layer that's interwoven between the other layers, because I think there's such a deep terror of reconnecting with the material that we've disconnected from, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, it does. Yeah, because I think it's like a deep disconnection from ourselves. And I think it's just a very natural part of being human, this deeper dimension. It's not something so special, that it's just very natural. And I think our whole culture got really disconnected from that. And yeah, and then somehow it was really dramatic to come back to that.
So 6 months in, you realize that this is something else going on, that it's some kind of awakening or all of that. How did the knowing of that change your experience of it? Or did it change your experience of
Yeah, it
it?
made all the difference because at first there was really like no understanding, no trust, no just being immersed in suffering, basically, with little pauses maybe. And then I started to understand, and it gave me trust. So I started to trust the process, and I started to see, oh, there's something in me that can observe it, and there's a way through it. So it I think it was a way also that yeah, with really little steps, because it took really long to start to be able to navigate it.
I think it would be really good to come back to navigating it, because that's a whole topic in itself. I just want to say the steps. When we say little steps, we mean so incredibly small sometimes. I don't
Yes.
think it can be overstated just how small and incremental those steps are,
Yes, yes.
and what the steps look like on any given day might also vary. Like, what was a small step yesterday might be impossible today, or we can't know in advance what those steps are going to be.
Yes, and it's also more like I think you have to just go through it, and it's sort of unraveling and undoing you. So, for example, with the resistance, I had so much resistance, and then they say, oh, you have to accept it. That's also what Eckhart said, you have to accept it. But it was more like the resistance had to play out, and just in its own timing, yeah. But it did help for me to like from Eckhart and meditation retreats to get some tools and yeah, how to be with yourself. That really did help.
I love what you say about the resistance, because I think so often there's some kind of subtle pushing against it, as if resistance is wrong in some way. And I think it's so important to actually meet it on its own terms, to let it play out, to see the nature of it, and to see the energetic nature of it. Because I don't think it's wrong, and yet often it's made out to be something that we should get past or accept or overcome or whatever. I think there's something forged in that that's really important.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's even like a huge part of the process. It's resistance. Yeah. So it's just part of the process, and just yeah, learning how to meet it and how to let it resist, because of course it wants to resist. Yeah.
And there's intelligence in the resistance too.
Yeah.
So often I think we're resisting the resistance and then and then we're really sort of in a double bind, aren't we? Making the resistance wrong and trying to resist the resistance. And I think that for me was one of the things that would sometimes be so I get the word anguish. There was so much anguish anyway, but then fighting with what was there, because I had some sort of idea of what I should be doing. I mean, navigating it just gets really subtle, doesn't it? Because on the one hand, as you say, there can be things that we can learn from wherever, from teachers, from spirituality or therapy or wherever, that are actually useful. Seeing like, oh, it is possible to have a different relationship with ourselves and to stay with ourselves. And yet, as you said, with that advice about resistance, that also ends up not being the case.
Yeah. Yeah, you really have to live your own lived experience through it. And it does help, like, because to connect with people who understand the terrain of it, because they can guide you, like, yeah, this is happening, and this, and then it's quicker, I think.
Coming back to the navigating it, as time went on, how did you navigate it?
Yeah, it was just a lot of yeah, stumbling around, and it sort of happened in a way. It happened, I think, by itself, that I just grew more capacity to stay with it, and the system got more used to it. And I think there was also a point that I thought, okay, this is what's gonna happen. This is my fate. There's no escaping. So yeah, how can I be with it instead of I want to get rid of it, and this is unbearable. Yeah, but it was really living through it.
You just used the word stumbling, and I totally relate to that. I mean, it felt like learning how to navigate it can really only happen from the lived experience of it. Like you said, that even though now we might talk with people who are going through it and have a sense of where they are and know the terrain, I think each of us has to live through it in the way, in our own individual ways. I don't think there's any way that we can say, okay, here's a list of ways to navigate the dark night, because we can be sure that, somebody will try number one and it just won't work, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and I think it's everyone really has their unique journey, and it's also really about coming back to that, to trusting yourself, and because it's ultimately it's all you and in yourself, and of course other people can help you, and it's really supportive to talk to people who go through that as well. And but ultimately it's your own journey, and there's a lot of common things, I think, for everyone, but it's also really unique.
Just coming back to what you said about it coming out of disconnection. I think there's something that comes out of having to be with ourselves in that way. Like, I think before we go into that, it's almost like our disconnectedness is supported in some way, and it feels like it's supported socially. That our disconnection from ourselves is encouraged in all sorts of ways by the systems that we live in. And so I think part of the anxiety for me, and I'm just thinking about this now, part of the anxiety for me was in turning around the other way, having thought that I needed to do something about the disconnection within. And so I was reaching outwards, I was searching for remedies that would fix it, or teachings that would make me feel better, or whatever else. There was something about the dropping of that really, really helped.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, I relate to that. It's more for me that I think because of I was in so much suffering, it sort of pushed me back to this deeper connection. Yeah, it sort of through that it how to say it, through all that suffering, it opened something up. Like there's something inside of me that's so much bigger than all of it. And I yeah, I started to connect back to that. And that gave a lot of trust slowly, because yeah, sometimes the old stuff was attacking me again. And but as soon as I started to feel that deeper connection, yeah, I started to trust more.
Yeah, I had a really similar experience. I think what you just said about the old stuff attacking you is really important. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, it almost felt like it were waves coming at me, and like I moved to a bit of a new consciousness. So I felt, for example, a bit more safe, and I felt this presence coming in, and then I got kicked back again, as if it was moving back and forth and slowly moving towards more wholeness, which is continuing until today in a different way, but I think it's the same process. Yeah.
I think there's something really important in what you just said, because I think we're so used to the idea of some kind of linear progression, that we went through this time and then we slowly and steadily got what we might call better, which is another whole thing in itself. But I think there's something about that cycle that you described, which also has been my experience, that there'll be some kind of opening and then maybe a closing or a contraction or something else, like the old comes back in again, and then a moving through that and the opening out and then back in again. And it seems to be that's part of what builds the capacity to
Yeah.
actually be with ourselves is that. And I think in those early days in the dark night, or when the suffering is really intense, it feels like there just is no capacity. And yet somehow we do get through it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, that we do get through it. And yeah, like how? Because it's sometimes so unbearable. Like, how do you get through it? But there's something in you that, yeah, that helps you get through it, I think.
As we're talking, I've got some memories coming of when I was really in the intensity of that time. And I wasn't working. Work was really beyond me. And I couldn't really do anything except the absolute basics. I could just about manage food and household stuff. But I spent a lot of time doing other things, watching TV, for example, or going for walks, or finding ways of being with myself when I couldn't be with myself. And occasionally there would be moments when I was just completely overtaken by it. And so I had to be in it where no distractions would work. So there were times pretty much every day, I think, where it would just come, whatever it was in the moment. And I couldn't distract from it. I'm just thinking loud here. I'm not sure where this is going, but it feels like we have to, on some level, we have to drop any notion of how to be with it. Like any idea of, okay, this is the way to be with it will kind of run interference with what actually wants to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, for me it feels like a long time ago, so I cannot really remember fully how, like how I did it. But I think it's just happening, what you say. It's just happening, and yeah, you're doing what you can do in the moment, like you look for some distraction or some friends, or yeah, and sometimes you're taken over or overtaken by it, and yeah, it's just sort of unfolding, I think. Yeah.
Unfolding is one of my favorite words. And you said earlier, we're being undone, we're being
Yes.
unravelled. Looking back on it now, what's your sense of that undoing?
I think there's deep intelligence to it, and you can trust it. However, it feels like a hell, but you can trust it. And there's more people, many more people going through it and have been through it. And yeah,
Absolutely. I think there's something about the combination of it feeling like hell and also knowing that there is something in that to trust. And I don't think you can trust until you can trust,
yes,
right? I mean,
definitely.
I think
Yes.
you can't think yourself into a position of trusting it. But maybe there's something that carries even from hearing that from other people. I wonder sometimes if I'd had access to these sorts of conversations, how would my dark night have been?
Yeah, me too. I didn't have, much help and people who understood. So yeah, I can relate to that. And this is what I do think that it might make the process a little bit easier and quicker. I could imagine. I'm not sure, but I could imagine. Yeah.
I think there's something about hearing that this is a terrain that's known, that this is a particular terrain, whether we call it the dark night of the soul or spiritual emergency or whatever, that this is something that humans go through, as you were saying. And I think for me, when I was in it, I did have the phrase dark night of the soul, and that was helpful. But I think because I didn't have much interaction with anybody who knew what it was, there was a lot of doubting of that. You know, a lot of basically my thinking just saying, oh, this is anxiety, or this is you falling apart, or all of that. And simultaneously, occasionally when somebody else would say, oh, I think you're depressed, or I would know that they were wrong. So there was this really weird thing of sometimes falling into that thinking myself, but also when it came from outside, knowing that that wasn't accurate, that that didn't feel right.
That's beautiful. Yeah, what you say. Yeah, that you felt on the one hand like sometimes doubting, like is this a depression or is, and on the other hand you knew no, it's something different. Yeah.
I wanted to come back to the suffering for a moment because I think there's something so profound in the suffering in the dark night, which has a different kind of quality, I think, to other kinds of suffering or suffering at other times. Looking back on that now, what's your sense of this sort of the feel of the suffering in the dark night?
Yeah, like really big for me, like really, really intense. And yeah, I think maybe through the darkness something awakens, like something, because there's so much darkness that you feel, but there's also a light in me, and there's something bigger in me, and that's not afraid of it. I had these moments that I had this deep, deep terror, and then at night, and then all of a sudden I felt so much peace, and then I felt, yeah, this is mystical. This is something bigger. And then the terror came back, and it was not something to hold on to, but it was just a beautiful experience to feel like, oh, there's something so much bigger in me, and it's not afraid of anything really. And that was really, it really moved, touched, even if I say it now, it touches me a lot.
I can really feel that. I think there's something so beautiful in that. I had what I would call glimpses or manna from heaven, you know, those moments where it was like, oh, there is something going on here. I think it would be really great to explore this word mystical a bit more, because that's my sense of it, that the dark night is absolutely happening on the mystical level as well as other levels, if we want to divide it up like that. What does that mean to you now, that word mystical?
I think that how I experience it is, I experience my life on different levels, like really the human, the everyday, which is really important to me. And then there's a deeper level, which I would call the mystical, and it feels like, yeah, it's really hard to describe, but it's like something bigger than this life, and it really comes from love. I feel like, yeah, it's really about love and integrating, and I think, I don't know, I don't have like very spiritual experience in the sense. So, I mean, some people have like with psychic abilities and stuff like that and going to different realms. I don't have that at all. So it's in a really human way, but it just feels like a bit of a deeper dimension in our consciousness that's really supportive and that's a big resource. And yeah, I'm really grateful for that.
A few weeks ago, I had the experience of just being really awash with gratitude for having gone through this. Just this profound, profound gratitude. I think because of what you just said, that, yeah, we're going about our lives and we're doing all of that everyday stuff. But I think having access to coming back to that place or that space of the mystical transforms all the rest in my experience. And in saying it transforms it, it doesn't make it not itself. I mean, anxiety is still anxiety, or pain is still pain. But the experiencing of it, I think, is transformed from that mystical space, or particularly when we come back to that mystical space. And it is hard to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think love is absolutely at the heart of it. And I think when we start to have those experiences of that, it's difficult to put into words, because it is hard to articulate. But I think also that in saying this, I'm really clear that that doesn't at all mean specialness in any kind of personal sense.
Yes, yes, definitely. Yeah. And I think for me, it feels that this deeper dimension wants to transform our humanity into more equality, into more health, into so on all levels, it starts to transform everything. And I think it's the basis is equality, and we're all one. We're all one, and we're all unique. We're also all unique.
I think for me, the seeing that I was neither inferior nor superior was a real turning point because of what you just said, that it's about equality and about the incredible uniqueness of each of us. I think the more we see in terms of what's in us, the more knowing there is of what this is. And by this I mean us, everything that's in our being. I think the closer we get to an embodied sense of what we mean by equality.
Yes, definitely. And for me, to be honest, it's quite a lot of work because there's a lot of shadow. There's a lot of parts that want to be superior, inferior, or so it's actually a lot of work to embody that more because I still have a lot of separation in me, and I find it hard because I want to be a good person. But there's a lot of crap actually, and like last years I became more aware of it, which was very confronting, but also really good. And now I feel that it's yeah, I can embody it more and more, and it's also a deep wish that I have. So yeah,
Yeah, I would think when we have those moments of mystical experience or gnosis, that sense of the knowing of that love and what we're describing, it's almost as if it then naturally brings up the shadow stuff. That each time there's a movement into that, yeah. I mean, I think that's both amazing and so hard, isn't it? Because
yes,
anywhere that we've tried to hide, anywhere that we've tried to be better than or less than, or all of that is going to be shown to us.
yes,
I mean, just to say, we're both smiling and laughing. And I think that's because we know what follows from that is a greater capacity and a greater sense of the love that we're talking about. That we have to somehow meet all of it within ourselves to be able to really see it and meet it outside of ourselves. And I think there's a lot of subtlety and complexity in that, because I don't think that what we're saying in that is, we see something sort of bad outside ourselves. It's also in us in the same way. I don't think it's as binary as that.
no, it's very nuanced in my experience too, and it's really about being curious. And I think life is. It feels almost like life is showing you and teaching you. And sometimes I feel also with friends in difficult things like, oh, now I'm in I've been in both positions, and now I understand better how it feels like, and it brings compassion because you've lived through it. So you understand, like, oh yeah, but I also have this in me, and it's really shit if you're in it. It's just separation, and it's not really your fault. It's just the human condition. So it brings a lot of compassion because you start to see all of it in yourself and in others, and yeah,
I think once you've seen the pain inherent in your own sense of either superiority or inferiority, and that's been met through the eyes, as it were, of the love, it's impossible to not have compassion, isn't
yes,
it? I mean, obviously, we're not talking about all the time and every occasion, and
no, no,
I
no,
don't think that compassion is always fitting. I think there are many things that can be fitting to different circumstances, but I think there's something about those moments of having compassion for ourselves, of being in that love that isn't trying to change or fix or push, but is seeing the actual nature of things within us.
yes,
I mean, what comes to mind as an example of one time when I was seeing how much envy there was in my structure. And I think what we'd do prior to the dark night is either cover it up in some way. As you said, we all want to be a good person, right? We're all trying to sort of bury those things in some way, or cut off from it, disconnect from it, or tell a narrative about it which made it justifiable. Or, there's so many things that we can do around those feelings. And yet I think what the dark night teaches us is how to be with something on its own terms as it is, without that kind of justification or explanation or making it wrong or bad or something to be ashamed of, but feeling it in a deeply embodied way for what it is. And inevitably that opens up into something else, right? I mean, we can't know what that something else is until we're there, but inevitably there's something that moves in that.
yeah, yeah. I totally agree, and I can also relate to it, and yeah, it's really about like facing it, like facing the truth of it, and often you do find innocence at the root of it as well. Like it's like yeah, as a child, like I always want to be really good, and as a child, this gave me appreciation from my parents. Like yeah, I'm really good. I'm doing everything really good. I'm a good person, and it became an identity. Yeah, but then you see the innocence, and it's slowly over time when you meet it and meet it and meet it, it starts to integrate, and you start to see like, oh, now it's okay that I'm angry at someone and I have some sides that are not so nice. It's more okay than it used to be. I'm just a human being. I don't need to be so perfect. Yeah. Like everyone else, because for other people I wouldn't mind so much, but for myself I needed to be so perfect. It's still a pattern, but yeah, it starts to shift, yeah.
I think for some of us, that perfection pattern runs really deep, doesn't it? I mean, that was certainly the case for me. And I think one of the difficult things about the Dark Night was really seeing that. I love what you just said about facing the truth of it, because that's so much of what we're doing, isn't it? In the Dark Night, and subsequent to that is really just seeing, feeling, knowing the truth of what's here.
Yeah, and that brings great relief on some level. Like, oh, it's just enough to be here. It's just part of being human, and we're all in it together. And yeah, and if you don't like look at it, which makes total sense. I mean, I totally understand, but then it also can become really big. And if you start to look at it and be with it, and yeah, it starts to soften.
I think there's something about saying how much time we're talking about here. Often things take a long time to soften, don't they? We can have those moments where there's there's a big release or there's something that really shifts. And obviously those times are great. And there's something about just chipping away at things, isn't there? As we said, these small steps over time. And often I think when things change, they change quite subtly, don't they? It's like, for me, one of the biggest things to change in the dark night was my inner narrative, that went from being the kind of harsh perfectionist taskmaster. You should do this, you shouldn't do that. Why aren't you doing that? To something very different now. So different. I know there was a point to that and I can't remember where I was going.
It's fine. It's beautiful what you say, and yeah, I think mainly the process is slow. Yeah, very slow. I relate to that, and also I think how I see it is that we're waking up in thousands of years of insanity. So it's not so slow going through one person, like seeing changes in a few years. It's maybe in that sense it's not that slow.
Yes, I so love that you've said that we're waking up from thousands of years of insanity. That's exactly my sense of it. I didn't realize that when I was in the intensity of the dark night. I think that's become much clearer to me in the years since.
For me too, yeah.
Yeah, what else would you say about this process that we're in collectively, that we are waking up from thousands of years of insanity?
Yeah, for me it's also a bit of a mystery, but because of my own dark night, I do feel some trust in the process. And I do have a sense that the madness is coming to the surface now much more like in our own dark night, and that it's fighting back and it wants to stay in place. And but I also feel there's yeah, I do deep in my heart I believe that the goodness or the love will prevail. And maybe not in our lifetime, and but I do have a trust in the evolution towards the good side.
I'm really moved by that. I think there's really something to know in that, as you say, this is our individual experiences are part of this much bigger picture that we're moving towards. And I think then that puts our individual dark nights into a context that I think it was difficult for me to have at the time. I mean, I think I had some sense of that, but I couldn't have articulated it like you just did. I think it's really important to know that, yeah, the dark night is our own individual version of the madness coming to the surface. But it's the madness coming to the surface so that it can move towards sanity.
Yes, yes.
And so even though it looks like things are becoming worse, so to speak, and it's everything that we never wanted to come to the surface, to see the nature of our own insanity, I think is crucial in order for us to see the collective insanity, especially in dominant society, that there's an absolute parallel there in terms of seeing, like, precisely because we've been through the dark night, we can look at the madness and say, oh, that's really clearly insanity.
Yes, I totally agree. Yeah. And it also somehow it makes me a bit enthusiastic, like on some level, but I'm also really sad about all the suffering. It's horrible, and I mean, we don't know how it will go, and it can be after far after our lifetime. But there is, because of this process that you experienced in yourself with the dark night, yeah, you understand it on some level. And it gives hope because I saw in myself there's so much that's possible, like growing to so much more health. Yeah, it gives a lot of hope.
Absolutely. I mean, because we know the movement of it within ourselves and how different we are. I mean, I find it fascinating because, I'm sure outwardly we look the same, we sound the same, and yet it's really difficult to convey to anybody that hasn't been through this just how our our inner experience and our sense of ourselves and life is so completely different.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. And it's really hard to convey. It's really your internal experience. And yeah, I think our internal experience shapes our outer reality. So also as humanity, as a collective, it comes from our own psyche. So if that's not healthy, we cannot create a healthy and loving world.
I've been thinking about this quite a lot recently and how our, our inner terrain has been shaped by the outer, so that these parts within us, like the inner critic, or I think especially those parts, are the internalization of something external, which then feeds, it's a feedback loop essentially, isn't it, between inner and outer, that people are then acting out the internal on the external and vice versa. And I think there's something in the hope that you've just mentioned, or the sense that knowing what's possible on an individual level, we know that we're at that evolution towards love or the mystical. It does seem to be, to me, what's happening. And I think there's also something really important about staying grounded in that. That we're not talking about some sort of transcendent movement, but an evolution that's happening directly through, I guess we could say, being embodied, or is being directly embodied. And that humanity, or certainly dominant culture, is very much going through that at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's true what you say. Like it's really important to stay grounded and in our humanity, and to see like what am I called to. Like some people may be called to activism to really change the systems, and maybe we are more called to the inner work. And everyone has its own role, but I think many people are involved and they feel it. Yeah.
Beautiful. I think that's so important, isn't it? Because we're not talking about anything prescriptive at all. We're not saying, here's what you should be doing, or, that all comes through the intelligence of the unfolding itself. And I think we become clearer then on what our place is, what our role is in all of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah, and I think everyone is unique, and it's to tune in like what's important for me, how can I contribute, or what's yeah. And you don't even have to contribute if you're feeling really bad or anything, but it's more like yeah, what's called in me, and then I think it's beautiful because we can all contribute to a more beautiful world, which is a big wish I have in my heart, like that we can create a more beautiful world. And probably it's a lot of work, but I think it is possible.
It feels to me like there's something in us that already knows that that there's something in us that remembers how good it can be. And I don't often talk about that because I don't. But I think there's really something in saying there's something in us that already knows how good it could be.
Yeah.
Because there's something that knows that what we're being told is human nature. The things that we're being told are human nature, like war or competition or making profit or exploitation. We know that there's something so much deeper and more profoundly human than that.
Yes, we know. And I think it's also most people know. I mean, most people are, yeah, they have good intentions. And of course, we are all in a lot of dysfunctional stuff because of the human condition. But I think most people, yeah, they do have good intentions.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking the other day, it's a bit like we're on a collective basis, we're living in a really dysfunctional house with these completely bonkers parents whose narcissistic raging and psychopathy and all the stuff that's going on, of course that affects our nervous systems. But I was also saying the other day, like, that what came to me was that's not what I'm for. What that meant was I'm not here to feel the feelings that they're not able to feel. Like, I'm not here to process what is being currently disowned in the collective. And that was really interesting to me. And I don't think I'd really seen that before. That, I think often when we grow up in dysfunctional families, we end up being the ones who carries everything that hasn't been felt or that isn't being owned by the adults around us. And certainly for me, I came to believe that on some level, and it wasn't a conscious belief, that's what I was for. Like, I was there to be the receiver or the carrier of other people's pain in some way, or other people's disowned feelings. And seeing the other day, especially in relation to collective political stuff that was going on, a real sense of, oh, this absolutely isn't mine, was really interesting.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a relief. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I also relate to that. I think maybe we're more here to bring the new and to and not to focus so much on all the old insane structures and yeah. And some other people maybe have more the role in that to show that and dismantle that and stuff. Um
my sense is that once you see it's insane, there's not very much else to say.
yeah. Yeah.
And in a way, I think that's true with our inner state as well,
Yeah.
isn't it? I mean, I think there's something really, really important about seeing and feeling all of the different aspects of it within ourselves. And that's a very different space than when we're just in it. But I think just seeing, like, oh, yeah, that's that particular piece of madness, and I actually don't need to get too involved in that within myself, is, I think, one of the things that starts to happen.
That's beautiful and it gives you more freedom and choice, I think, no? And more leadership in yourself. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I think leadership's a really interesting word because I think there is something about becoming self-led, isn't there? Becoming our own authority, no longer looking at outside of ourselves for that, or seeing other people as more powerful than us. That is starting to come in more and more, actually, for me, is seeing other people might have more power for political or structural reasons, but they're actually not more powerful as individuals.
Yeah, beautiful. I think this is crucial for us as humanity also because now we're led by psychopaths and that we come to our own power and we can take more charge and see things clearly and yeah. And for me, I also recognize it in myself that I was thinking about control, which is like maybe everything has a shadow side and a constructive side or a good side and like taking the lead or being in control and the difference between it and like all these dysfunctional parts and what you say not being led by them so much but choose like oh I'm gonna choose for a constructive way of being and then you start to get more and more power yeah in a good way because I think we associate or we have a connection to power that may be negative but like power in a good way your own personal power and then maybe collectively as well and we can choose different things and yeah, and maybe be less easily manipulated as well.
Completely. I just remembered that in the dark night, one of the things I saw in that time was how I disowned my own strength. I think partly because it felt like there was something inherently harmful about being strong or being powerful. There was an association between being powerful and being a bad person in some way, or being a harmful person. And that was so important, I think, to see that disowning of my own strength or my own power. And I've circled back to that many, many, many times since then. It's really, really important that we do that, because I think once we have a sense of what healthy power is, as opposed to the distorted, toxic kinds of power that we're seeing so much at the moment, they feel completely different.
Yeah, and it's really beautiful what you say, and I think it's very crucial also for humanity, also in our personal process. And it's about both love and power. Because if we're only like compassionate, we don't cannot do much, it will not change. And if we have power without the heart, it can become dangerous, and without seeing the shadow. Because I think our system, if we have a lot of shadow and we don't see it, the shadow will start to use the power. Yeah.
Brilliantly described. I love that. As I experience the love more, the more of that power comes in. And it feels like part of that power is saying no to the distorted power, is being able to see it and really, really face it for what it is. And I think there's something that it can't withstand in that. I think when it's seen for what it is, it can't sustain itself.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, and there's something much more powerful than all that distorted power. And indeed, it's powerless against it, I think. But as if we don't look, it can become really big. Yeah, and really like we've seen it, I think, for centuries. And it's really sad, yeah. Because it causes so much suffering, so much.
I think to see it means that we have to feel the cost of the suffering of it, don't we? And to see that both individually but also collectively, to see what we've done.
Yeah.
You know, we talked at the beginning about how some of this is generational and generational trauma and so on. And something I've been feeling into a lot recently is also other things that have come generationally. You know, the harms, the privileges, the oppression of other people in all sorts of different ways. And I think to see something is to reckon with all of it across the board.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's really, really important. Yeah. And it's really sad. When we speak about it now, I feel a lot of sadness that we made each other, the dominant groups really made the other groups suffer so, so much. It's just horrible. I think it's maybe for the collective, for many, still too much to take it in, the truth of it. Yeah.
Yeah. The extent of the grief of that is huge. And I think it's absolutely part of, I mean, I think it begins to surface in the dark night, but I think it's really in the years after the dark night that we start to really grapple with these much bigger, more collective movements.
Yeah, for me it was the same. Yeah. Yeah. And I think there are many aspects to this, yeah, however you want to call it, awakening, healing, but it moves in different directions. So you see the collective dynamics, you become more conscious of this and the things in yourself, and then creating like a more healthy ego. Like it works on many different levels, I think. But it's the same consciousness, the same evolution.
Absolutely. Yeah. It feels to me like once that starts to come in, it can only transform on all of those levels,
Yes.
because there's kind of nothing much left to hold it out. You know, I think that's what gets stripped away in the dark night, isn't it? All of the defenses against that. And I think much as we've been, you know, holding things in, we've also been keeping that out on some level, because because we know that it will undo us. If
Yes,
we
yes.
start to let that love in, that's kind of it, isn't it? Like once it starts to be let in, that will only end in our undoing.
Yeah, and it's actually really good news. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not easy at all, but it's good news. Yeah, it's very much necessary, I think.
Very much. You know, when I'm talking to people who are going through a dark night, particularly when they're at the beginning, I often feel at least two things simultaneously. One is really knowing, really feeling for them in terms of the suffering and the degree of pain and the intensity of pain. And the other is smiling, knowing that ultimately it is definitely good news.
Yes, I have the same. I even feel some enthusiasm, and it's a bit weird to say that sometimes, but it's genuine. Like, yeah, I know this is for the good ultimately. Yeah.
And I know that we both really understand that that can feel very unreachable when you're at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely.
I
It's
mean,
just
if somebody had have said that to me at the beginning of mine, I mean, it would have been good to hear for sure. But also I would have massively doubted it and thought that, oh, well, maybe that could be the case for you, but that won't be the case for me. Or, you know, there would have been some sort of comparison in there. But I think it's important to say we are saying this is good news, full stop, right?
yeah.
However long that takes, so may take a long, long time as it did for us.
Yes, and I would have like you it's not a problem because you don't have to feel it. You can just feel shit and it's just shit. It's just really difficult. But I think it's good to know from other people's experience and yeah.
Yeah. On that note, before we finish, is there anything you'd want to share with people who are right in it just now?
Yeah, I think it's just really, really hard and just know that you're not alone. So there are more people like us who went through it and many more people. And yeah, it's hard to put it into words. But I think I would recommend like connecting to people who understand, like to this podcast or that's really helpful. And yeah, life will show you the way. And you're being held, even though it doesn't feel like that. It feels really, really alone and isolated and just really, really difficult. But yeah, I do believe you're being held.
Anna, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fiona. I really enjoyed it. It's a bit strange maybe, but I feel so much passion about this topic. Yeah.
Fantastic. See you soon.
See you soon.